strange fate that we should suffer so much fear and doubt over so small a thing. Such a little thing.
Boromir's right, you know. Look at the size of this thing. I mean, it's tiny. It's almost 1/44th scale. It's not, it's 1/72nd scale, but... And that's one of the reasons why I did the truck. You know, the starter truck, the Unimodel AS2. And thank you all very much for your lovely and copious amounts of comments. I'm definitely going to do more of these sort of things. I kind of prefer things like this, truck, actual transport, as opposed to armour. So we'll see where that leads. But yeah, remember I said in the other update video for the group builds that progress was progressing at a progressive rate. Well, it's kind of... I always seem to say one thing in one video and then the next video seems to be the complete opposite, and that is actually the case. The Karush, I've got the pronunciation right now, it's Karush, I think. I hope. I've got the underside gunnery platform kind of done, but it's progress on that's kind of slowed at the moment. I did, however, manage to, and this was one of the reasons, because I absolutely hate having to mask canopies. In particular, complex canopies, which the Karush certainly is no exception. But thankfully, Edward do a pre-cut mask set for this very kit, for the Mirage Hobby one. Although, oddly enough, only for the top part. They don't do it for this part, which is in itself actually quite complicated. But they're all square, so, well, kind of square. There's a few angular ones, but it should be easy enough to do that. So I can get back working with that one, because that's really the next thing, the canopy. I'm going to show the canopy closed on it, because there's enough clear to see what's going on inside anyway, and it just gives that a nice look. But the main problem, as Boromir said, was this little thing. So much fear and doubt over such a little thing. It took a lot to get it to this stage, and it looks fairly complete, but it's not really. I'll show you why. Come here. So here we are. Here's the little Hummel. This is the state it's in, I was about to say. The stage it's at. Well, I suppose the state that it's in as well. It's kind of applicable. Technically, it's actually close to being completed. I mean, really all I have to do, if I wanted to, was decal it, stick the wheels and the props on, or the prop I should say, not the props, and it'll be done. But it's the canopy, and it was always going to be the canopy with this one, because as you know, it's a vac form canopy, and it's one of those vac forms that masquerades as part of the fuselage as well, which means that you have to get a seamless join between, if you could imagine, this is the inside face of the styrene of the fuselage, so that goes around like that, and you've got the fuselage going down, and this is your vac form canopy. The joint is like this, and that has to be seamless. You can't see a join there because there isn't a join there. It's different when you've got a canopy that then fits onto a fuselage like this and there is an actual join. That you can deal with, but when the canopy is part of the fuselage, it's an absolute nightmare. I've done this before on that little AZ Models Bob. If you look back in my videos, you'll see it way back at the start. But it was a tubular type, or oval type canopy, which was a little bit easier than this one. But these are 3 flat sides. Now, I don't know if the camera will pick this up, but you can actually, if I can get the light to reflect right, I can see a demarcation line there between fuselage and vac form canopy, which isn't meant to be there. That's meant to be seamless. And these shoulders here next to these quadrant panels, there's so much filler material here that these actually look recessed, as opposed to just, you know, being nice, being flat. So it kind of dips down into the clear part. So that's the way it is at the moment, and I'm faced with a couple of choices based on a couple of occurrences. When I was building up this area here, or with the amount of sanding that I've had to do, I should say, this part of this little edge here became so thin, it was wafer thin, that the merest breath might have withered, as they say. So I built it up using Squadron Green, because I needed something that could go on soft but then dry very, very hard. And unfortunately, some of it, the Squadron has worked its way inside, so you can't see it with the canopy the way it is at the moment, but in that far corner over here, in here on the inside, there's a blob of bottle green putty. Now that wouldn't be a problem if things were going to stay the way they are, but and it's just one thing that led to another. Because the injection moulded parts were just absolute garbage, I completely scratch built the undercarriage wheel struts using aluminium tubing, and I put nickel rod down the centre of them so that when it protruded slightly it gave me the equivalent of a locating pin. So all I had to do was drill, in this instance, 6 holes, and the rod would go in there. I would glue that, and that would give a very, very strong support for the tubing. Problem was that when I was doing some dry fitting, before I'd used any glue at all, one of the little bits of rod slid out and went inside the canopy, inside the cockpit. Now, as luck would have it, there was supposed to be a bulkhead that you were supposed to fit here. I didn't bother because it was just such a bad fit, which means that we have direct access to the insides via these 2 little air vents on the front. So it was just a simple case of putting the plane up on its end, giving it a couple of taps and a couple of shuggles, and a little bit of nickel rod worked its way out. The only problem is it was followed by one of the joysticks. And because so much sanding and filling has taken place, I have quite a bit of sanding dust on the inside of the canopy. Now I did try and remedy that by actually submersing the whole thing in water, and because we technically have little drain holes here, the air came out there, it filled up with water, gave it a little shake and then let it drip out, which did work to a certain extent, but there are still a lot of, in fact actually I think it made it maybe worse in some cases, because some of the dust has now dried onto the inside of the windscreen. So I'm now faced with a couple of choices, and one is keeping this canopy as is and just grinning and bearing with this join here, which the problem is we've used Alclad on this. Now Alclad is the single most unforgiving surface coating medium ever. It's fantastic, don't get me wrong, it's unparalleled. Nothing comes close to Alclad really, other than actual metal. But because it's such a thin, micron thin coating, unlike a layer of acrylic or enamel paint, which would be quite thick and could maybe hide a few incongruities here and there, Alclad just basically says, oh look, you missed this bit, and what about this bit? You've got a scratch here. The surface has to be flawless, and when you're doing that much sanding and filling and sanding and filling, you can forget that. I mean, I've got an area down here, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, if I can get the light right, where I didn't polish that bit, and it was obviously with a very, very fine grain sanding stick, but it's visible, clearly visible. So I don't know if the decal will cover that, but I might need to attend to that. But the Alclad has kind of shown the join between the canopy and the fuselage, which shouldn't really be there. But if I can live with that, what I might try and do is, taking a brand new ultra sharp surgical blade, is open the canopy. Now the Siebel's canopy is hinged here and here, and I'd need to cut along here, around the roof light area, down here and along, and it opens out this way. But doing so would enable me to either get a pair of tweezers in and maybe dislodge that bit of putty, or if the worst comes to the worst, just put a blob of RLMO2 in that back corner and hope that it kind of disguises it. I'll be able to get a fine brush in there and give the interior a bit of a dusting, and I'll also be able to put the joystick back in as well, because it's actually this side that the joystick came away from. If I'm happy to live with the imperfections of the canopy to fuselage join, my other choice is, because these kits come with 2 canopies, is to rip this one off and go right back to the bare bones and fit another canopy on, which is a kind of a daunting thought, to be honest with you. But what I would try this time, instead of having the canopy join like this and then try and make that seamless, is I would take the, if you can imagine again, this is the inside face of the styrene, so it goes around like this on in the fuselage, and then the spine of the aircraft goes back that way. I would cut the canopy slightly longer with a little bit of surplus around the end, as it were, say 1 millimetre's worth, and then take 1 millimetre here on the fuselage, on the outer skin, and pare it down just that little bit, so that this would actually come along and step down, and then fit the canopy, the little overlap, into this recessed area, so that I'd have a better chance of getting a nice level surface here without having to encroach too much onto the actual canopy, and also it would give me a firmer surface on which to work, because the canopy would then be supported by the plastic. But I don't know, that's why I decided to build the truck and also this thing in the period that I've been trying to figure out what to do with this thing. So that's the choice. The group build actually finished on the 4th of March, but Aaron Newlands has extended it for us slow coaches for another 2 or 3 weeks. If I go with opening the canopy and it works, then I should be able to get this thing done within a week. If I go down the road of removing the canopy and starting from scratch, then I'm not saying I'll have to withdraw from the group build, but there's no way I'm going to make it in time. But anyway, I'm not complaining about this. This is all part of the learning process, and it's teaching me a lot, even though it's a tiny little thing. As for the ISM group build, the Karush, as it's supposed to be pronounced, it's not changed a great deal from when you last saw it. The ailerons have been glued in position, and I've got the lower gun platform kind of in place. This is an odd thing. This, it comes actually, it doesn't come that shape on the sprue. It actually comes flat, and there's little sort of, it's kind of like the plastic equivalent of photo etch. I actually have to bend it into this shape to make sure it conforms to the same shape as the clear part up front. And of course, the more times you do that, you weaken the joins, and eventually they popped open. So I had to basically assemble this as 5 parts, which was actually a lot easier, to be honest. And there was a lot of gaps here that needed to be attended to. So that's kind of taken a wee while, and it's one of those things. It takes ages. You're not really getting an awful lot of progress made. And I'm not saying it knocks the wind out of your sails, but you kind of get a bit sick looking at the thing. So that was, as I say, why I did the truck and the little the Kawasaki thing, which in hindsight was actually quite a bad idea, because the Kawasaki is made by AZ Models, and their stuff's just as bad as this. It required so much filling and sanding, and then I used Alclad on it as well. But anyway, first world problems, huh? So there we go. That's where we are with the Hummel and the Karush. Let's just hope that next time you see them, there'll be a lot more progress made. We'll see. Toodaloo the new.